Why is it that nobody wants to talk about death or dying? And why is death such a taboo topic? Even in my profession, when I've been asked what I might do, and I give the title of grief therapist, I notice there seems to be a general response, common response of awkwardness. People aren't sure how to respond to that. And that could be for many reasons, I guess. Some of the things I've thought that people feel awkward when I introduce myself or my job title is that, one, they fear death, or maybe, they've had an experience of loss and it's potentially triggered them to think about that experience, good or bad. So my question generally is also that it possibly could be that they just don't like talking about death. So what are we so afraid of? So let's explore. So today, even want to actually start with sharing some words with you to see how these words make you feel. And the words, I want you to go within and try to, feel into them and try to gain an understanding of maybe where you sit when I share these words with you. Words like death, dying, deceased, loss of a loved one, taking one's life, bury, widowed. So these words, how do they make you feel? I think they're important words because it'll actually be the beginning point for you to identify whether you're comfortable with them or not. And if not, maybe there's opportunity for curiosity as to why they potentially have you feeling uncomfortable. So what about the word audacious? So you might be thinking, what is that word? Audacious, E-D-I-C-I-U-S, is spelled backwards. So if you now unjumble that, why have I given that word to you spelt in reverse? Well, again, it's a topic that is where most people aren't really keen to discuss. There could be many reasons for that. One, they've had their own experience around it. They could have strong opinions about it and or just don't understand it. For whatever reason, this word for me and in my work, what I found is just another word and another reason that we don't talk about death or dying, especially if it's in relation to this and one has left the world under these circumstances. So one common thing in my work is I have to be careful about the words I use, even though death is normal. I have to be careful because it's all flagged as not something that we should be discussing on social media. Yet I still get confused with that because really what we see in movies and social media with TV even, there's just so much that is shared that we don't need to. So why is death such a taboo topic? Well, I hope today to try and discover and share with you some of my reasons behind this. So it is an important topic to explore, and I think it's so that we can start to remove any fears that we might have associated to these words. From my perspective, and the reason for doing this is so that I can begin to open conversations around all of these words, including the word bereaved, so that we can learn to communicate on so many levels. Because even as a bereaved person, and not just my experience only, we as a community do find it hard to communicate to the bereaved, which I'll tap into a little bit more in further down into the video. So on a whole, what I've witnessed though through my work, including my own experiences of loss, is it is actually devastating for many. And actually, because it is devastating, it's actually hard for people to sometimes heal and find resolution through that experience. And one reason that I feel this is because we generally don't really understand the cycle or the meaning with the cycle of life and death and that of the afterlife, and knowing that it's actually a natural part of life. Now, it's different, I think, in the sense of two ways. It's different for Westerners in this way, very much so. But if we look at the Eastern cultures and traditions, it's such a celebrated and normal process, even for everyone to be involved, including children, in that ritualistic celebration to honor our loved ones. And so I'm glad that you are here today. I hope this topic interests you. Welcome to my channel. My name is Melissa Newman. My business is Rising Strong Holistic Healing, and I'm a grief therapist. My focus in my work is definitely supporting those bereaved, but importantly also trauma loss, because that's basically my experience, I guess. I created this channel so that I could bring weekly topics and open conversations about many things around death, dying, and grieving. The reason why I've wished to share and open these conversations is through my lived experience. I've seen many complexities, that of my own and that of clients, but basically I hope through all of my wisdom learnings that I can offer guidance and insights to help all of you be able to formulate your own understandings. And ultimately, my goal of this channel is to break the silence on death and dying. And what that will do when we break the silence by open conversations means that we can come into learnings and understandings and understand what it means for us, but so that grief and loss is less devastating for us all, because it is through that one thing, through education and knowledge, that when we have knowledge and information, it will make that process less devastating, because I've been through the rough parts of that, and honestly don't want, if I can help others not go through what I went through, then that's my mission, that's my quest. So let's begin. So as a grief and trauma loss therapist, my main focus is supporting those that are bereaved. But what I found is I started receiving work to support those who are terminally ill. And not only that, then that, which is such an honouring role, just encouraged me more to be with souls that are in this position. And so I also volunteer weekly in my local hospice. And it's the most amazing work. And there's only one word for it, actually. It's an honourable role to be able to walk beside someone who has to go through that process of finalisation. And what it actually taught me, or has shown to me, is that whole experience creates for so many different conversations around death and dying. And what I also noticed is the fear that many of us have about leaving the world. And so I found that I was having these conversations on such deep levels that I actually am very comfortable to have these conversations. but I found I'm comfortable, but the majority of people are not. So this is where we are today with my video. So I hope to share some different little insights that might encourage you to open some conversations with you and your family and your friends. And so that whole experience, I guess, and journey that I've been on, one thing that it's highlighted to me is how life really matters, and the menial things that we tend to focus on are just not important. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to ask the question again. So what are we afraid of? So my experience, as I'm going to share now a little bit about my story, it was devastating, and for a few reasons that I can share with you today. And one of those was not being educated enough about life and death, or that of the afterlife. I wasn't educated how to navigate that experience when it touched my life, and nor did my upbringing allow for that process either. Like, I did go to, as a child, probably not to my teenage years actually, I did experience a few funerals within family, but there's not a whole lot that I learnt about that, is what I could say. And so because of that, which I'm about to share now, this is kind of leading me to where I want to go with my conversation, is all of those are contributing factors as to why we're not learning how this is such a normal part of life. And I feel it could be such a collective reason, as I sort of tapped into us Westerners, that we don't really know healthily how to openly talk about death, or know the best ways that we can celebrate our loved ones. And through that, we're not learning how to communicate with the bereaved. So when we go through that process and being a witness to other people's emotions. So I can say this because firsthand, I have experienced how people have reacted to me through my loss, and what that looked like. One of the probably main contributing factors to that, and I'm not alone on this, is the experience through Adisha's, the trauma loss that I went through, because that alone has a lot of stigma associated to it, which is probably a story for another time. But the other part was, as a parent, we don't expect to lose our children so early, or lose our children at all, to be honest. How many times have many of us thought that we are supposed to go before our children? So I wasn't prepared for that. I never once even thought that that was a possibility in my life, yet it is a definite probability for all of us. And so that was the other part of my experience that I was unprepared for. So looking back, I can actually honestly say I was not prepared for these experiences. And this is what I hope to sort of highlight a few different things, so that maybe you can become more prepared and not end up in a situation as I was, I guess. And this is why I feel it is important to encourage all of us, all of you, to have these open conversations with friends, with your family, and your children about all things related to death. Because there is a lot to be considered when having to go through the process of, I guess, the funeral process, the finalisation, and the stage of, I guess, saying goodbye to our loved one, although it's not a permanent goodbye because they're always with us. So now I'm going to highlight a few situations that could be a good start for anyone to start the open conversations. And this might feel confronting when I put these words out there. So just move forward through this video as you feel most comfortable and most safe to do so. So, death plan. My question to you is, do you have one? Just letting you think about that. The death plan, how does that make you feel? You know, the death plan is all about creating a plan for all the processes that need to be taken and considered, including all the family members that will be a part of that process. So you might be thinking at this point, well, I don't really need one. I'm healthy. I'm young. Oh my God, you know, that's like when I'm 50 or 60. I don't really need to think about that now. You might be thinking, oh, I don't really like having those conversations. Whatever it might be that you're thinking, I'm going to raise an important question that might help build your urgency maybe to start considering what a death plan might look like for you. So here's a question for you to ponder now. So what if you have one child and both the parents, yourself and your partner, pass away early? So do you have your child included in your death plan? Or do you even have a death plan that would even consider taking this into consideration? You know, what legalities do you have set in place for this worst case scenario? Because it would be horrible for that to happen, obviously. But it's real, you know, like, yes, it is a worst case scenario. And it's probably something I guess we're all trying to avoid, but it's better actually being prepared than unprepared. So if nothing has been communicated legally about your wishes, who gets to decide about the care of your child? Are you sure you want to just leave it to hope? Hoping for the best outcome? So let's think about it this way. In our life, our jobs, we have risk management and mitigation in everything that we do. We consider all the probabilities and the likelihoods for different scenarios to unfold in a work environment. Now that's always based on the likelihood and the highest risk of things to actually occur. So my question, if death is an inevitable part of life, then why are we not planning for it? And if you think about this and go backwards a little bit, we plan for birth. We plan everything about birth and how the baby's going to come into the world and what we're going to do and what doctor we have and what nurses we might have around us and family members and etc. So we plan for all of that. So why are we not planning for the end, as in our death plan? So whilst these questions are very real and confronting, they are very important questions for us to consider. And I guess I use that in the hope to encourage conversations and so that you can probably start the process. The added benefit from starting these conversations is that it can actually remove the fears. I've noticed that when working with the terminally ill. You know, they're processing, like they're even processing to the point of trying to wipe clean any regrets they might have or conversations they had with people that they feel now in this position that they could have had better conversations, more loving and more compassionate. So they're going through a different process. And so all of these thoughts and feelings, but yet they come into a place where they might start out fearful, but once they understand through education, they actually become quite relaxed with the idea and eager with the idea. There's other reasons actually attributed to that, but I won't go into that. But as an example, if you need an example to maybe possibly start the conversation, it could be just when you're in a nice, comfortable social space with your family, just, like bring the conversation forward by, hey, did you know that when I die, this is what I think would be pretty cool. And you might be a surfer. Let's say you're a surfer and you want something really radical to take place. It could be, so that's lighthearted, right? But it will get the conversation started, which then leads me into the next little topic, and that is planning a funeral. And the thing I found was I didn't realize there was so much opportunity to create it as uniquely as I could have. So there are no set rules when it comes to organizing a funeral. Did you know that? Did you know that it can be organized as unique to you and your family, in the sense that you can dress and prepare the body of the deceased your way in your home with certain family members, very close family members around you? It can be a very private family ritual, opposed to just one where it's everybody coming to a local community within a funeral home and organization. It can be so unique. Whatever it is that is the wish of the deceased, or whatever your wishes are, you can create it however you wish. You can then, if you wanted to, on top of that, have a more extended farewell, and that could be extended to family and friends and community, especially if you think about people that are strong role models in community. You might want to involve the community. It's really only limited by your imagination and the wishes of all people involved. So most of us are not aware that we have all these options available to us. And I think that's because we don't, or we haven't prepared ahead of time what that could look like. But I know for me, if I knew more back then what I know now, I would have done some things differently to farewell my son. And I guess in hindsight, all I can do is offer these learnings to you so that you can have the most memorable, the most honourable experience, and explore what those options are for you. So I think, when it comes to planning funerals and all this sort of stuff, I think it comes back to, where am I going with this? It comes back to that one thing, that one sort of thought that we have, that I have ages before I need to worry about that. And even other people, if you're communicating around or wanting to communicate, they might be slightly dismissive and say the exact same thing, which generally stops us from exploring any further, because you go, oh, kind of stop. Yeah, probably do have ages, but we don't. It's often, I guess, not on our list of priorities either. And these are all the different reasons. But unfortunately, as life is, we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. It will be And it can be for some, as it was for me, completely unexpected. We find ourselves in, all of a sudden, an uncomfortable situation. We become overwhelmed, we become stressed, and through all of the insurmountable anguish, all of a sudden, death becomes very real. And so how do we navigate this process? So this is what I hope to share a little bit with you. So if we have found ourselves to be deep in emotions because of the loss of someone, we will feel like there's a lot to handle. It was for me. It was so overwhelming, the different things that I had to move through. I'm so grateful for my son, my other son, who was such a rock to support me, and the decision making that was required. But we can often just hand it over to, if we've been brought up a certain way, not really knowing how to go through this funeral process, we can just do what we know. And most often than not, that is to hand it over to the funeral organisations, and they do an amazing job. They're beautiful. Who I went to was extremely compassionate. That was Gregson and Waite. They were amazing through that process. So caring, and I wouldn't have a wrong thing to say against them, but I handed it over because there was parts, one, that I didn't want to deal with it, and two, I think I was more overwhelmed by the whole experience. And I will add, my experience was more complicated. I'm not the only one that has gone through Odysseus. But that experience, for most people, they don't really even understand how different that process is on a legality side, and it's just a whole nother level of trauma. And I'm sure some of you could probably work out why that would be. But anyway, so all that aside, knowing what I know now, I do wish I had better knowledge so that I could have done things differently through the funeral process. And if you now have more information on how to be prepared, and this is only a snippet of information, then you can avoid some of the experiences that I went through. And ultimately, that is to make your journey a lot less uncomfortable. And if you had the opportunity now to review and plan and find and understand everything that you would like that experience to be for other family members, or how you want it to be for yourself, then wouldn't you prefer to make that experience more meaningful, in the sense of now creating a very unique ritual that you might like to carry through with your family? So wouldn't you like to come up with something that's very unique and different for you, rather than all of a sudden become sort of, I guess, thrusted into that experience and leaving it, I guess, for someone else to do? Because when I look back now, it's actually a really important process to go through this kind of ritual, this beautiful way of honouring all of our loved ones. You have that opportunity to create that experience, and that gives you the power to be in control of the process as much as you like or as little as you like. But it starts with having these conversations now and being able to plan for your death plan. So I want to share with you a quote. I think it's really important. So no one wants to die. Even people who want to go to heaven don't want to die to get there. And yet death is the destination for us all. So no one has ever escaped it. And that is how it should be, because death is very, very likely the single best invention of life. It's a life change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. That's a Steve Jobs quote. I think it's actually sort of pinpoints, I guess, or taps into what I've been trying to express today. So I, like many of you who have supported others after loss, I've had the same response, thinking either it won't happen to me or thinking that I have years before needing to worry about this, but yet often finding ourselves answering that dreaded knock on the door much earlier than expected. So we don't know when it's going to happen. We never know when it's going to enter our lives. And this is why I hope that you can see the importance to have some open conversations. But this learning here is hopefully so that you can become better prepared for this inevitable experience. And I hope to encourage you not to keep putting it off, so that you can understand what's important to you, to your family and your children, to create a better experience for all. And if we are open about death, well, it can calm our fears. But this then leads into the next area that I want to highlight and discuss. And I'm going to put out a question. So why is it then? The next question, why is it that death has been hidden from view and rarely discussed? I certainly can say that for my generation. And why is it that we struggle to communicate with the bereaved? So communicating with the bereaved is another important part of that process. So from my experience, this was definitely true on a few levels. I could say there was a general discomfort from people not knowing how to communicate with us, me, the bereaved. While yes, my grief experience was complicated by trauma loss, I think it mostly comes back to the lack of understanding. And for me, I guess why many people weren't feeling comfortable to communicate with me or help me through my healing process was because it was associated to Odysseus. But aside from that one experience, most people are just worried when it comes to the bereaved about what they say and communicate to the bereaved. And they're worried because they don't wish to hurt the person anymore, but yet often feeling they need to fix the situation. And that's a linear thing with most of us, is that we just want to make their situation better. But the thing is, the aim to try to fix the situation, we can't actually fix this experience. The one key thing that needs to take place is deep listening, deep, compassionate listening. And so the other part with that people aren't prepared for is that grief doesn't sort of just finish in a couple of weeks when the funeral is over. This is a long, ongoing process for us to move through all the stages of grief. And with that journey, the person that is bereaved, they are processing. For them to process, they need to verbalize what it is that they're thinking and feeling and what it is that they're confused about. And the difficulty from people who are hearing these conversations, that over time our family and friends can get just sick and tired of hearing about us talking about our loved ones. And unfortunately, if you're a true, compassionate, loving supporter of your family and friends, it shouldn't matter how long that process takes. And what is most definitely required is, even if the story has been repeated 50,000 times, the most loving thing that you can do is to be able to keep sitting there in that deep silence. You don't have to have all the answers. And if anything, you can actually ask the person you're supporting, what do you need? How can I best support you? That's a great starting place to help with communication with the bereaved. It's a tricky one. I know that most people generally have the absolute love in their heart that they don't wish to hurt the person any further. But often what tends to happen is they're looking for solutions to fix, and then that starts to create discomfort. It's not working for the bereaved. So I just want to highlight that today. So it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. If we find it difficult now, when we're not in these experiences, to communicate around death, then generally, when it comes to the time, it is a common experience that you probably won't know how to communicate to the bereaved. So this is where it's important, tapping back into how we need to be educated and planned for these experiences, and learn however you can learn through books. There's plenty of books that you can read that are quite insightful. I would encourage reading lots of the different books on the afterlife. It's so fascinating. There's two books I'll put them into the link. There's two, one by Elizabeth Clare Prophet, Absolute Truth, what she's teaching through her books. Amazing being. I can't remember the title of hers, but there's many of you might know of Dolores Cannon. She's written her books. She's quite insightful and truthful with her information. And then there's all the books on people's life-death experiences. So it's important for you to ponder these questions, that if you're not sure how to communicate with the bereaved or how you would, then these are some avenues that you can take. So this communication, when death is hidden from view and rarely discussed, is an important area that I wish to highlight in regards to why I think that is. And for me, I think it comes down to how we're educating our children, for example. So I think there's two things I actually want to say here. So I want to actually go back a step before I move on to that. So I want to actually, like when I'm talking about education, how we can read all the different books, I also think understanding, actually Elizabeth Clare, she will highlight this as well, understanding this evolution of the soul through the life and death cycle and that of the afterlife. I think that's really important to understand, because I think most of us, well, I'm speaking for myself, and I think it's collective. I could honestly say that I feel it's collective. We don't really understand how it all relates, especially with these words. So these words are really important with love, with soulmates, soul sharing, life, life plans, incarnations, crystal, magnetic, and guide grids, devolvement of the soul, duality. I think when we can actually understand all of these, now this is deep, like this really, when you start learning about all of what this life cycle is, which includes all those aspects that I just mentioned, then I think this is the one thing that can actually help us move from the fear of talking about death. You might be thinking with some of those words like, what is a life plan? What is conscious evolution? What are these grids that I'm talking about? Spirituality. It all has everything to do with the cycle of life and our evolution, and why we are here. So a question for you to contemplate is definitely life and death and what it means. So where does the soul start, for example? And where does the soul end? That's just like one question that I found fascinating. A story for another time, but it's all these things that I hope I can sort of generate some curiosity. So I'm opening this subject to encourage you to be curious about life and the cycles of birth and death, so that when you can even understand small parts of this, it will begin to change how you probably think and feel about death, and remove a lot of your fears if you have any. So I'm only bringing this information forward, and it may resonate with you and it may not, and that's totally perfect as it is. But always remember, it is from information that we receive that you always use discernment to understand what it means for you. So you might think completely differently to me, and that's also okay. It doesn't mean it's right or wrong. It's just whatever we can resonate with to make the peace that we need. Ultimately, information from other people's experiences even enables all of us to learn. And so you only have to read, as I said, the many books on the afterlife and near-death experiences, with the magical transformations people have had for the different individuals and how that changed their lives with how they live. It changed their lives to the level, more cases than not, to live with more purpose, to live with more meaning. They live with more integrity and kindness and benevolence and compassion, but ultimately they live and change their life so that it is in devotion to humanity. It's absolutely true, because whilst in my heart, through when I look back on my life, I can see my experiences. I know who I am, and I'm most definitely those more commonly used words. But when you go through different experiences of life, such as grief is quite devastating for many, it really does show you what matters, and you start to actually truly want to explore what this life is all about. It definitely triggers that. Anyway, so the cycle of life, it is a remembrance, and it is a life of teachings, and it is to be a life of realizations so that we can come into our higher conscious selves. So it's a conscious evolution for us to get closer to our soul, and it's a return to our connection with the planet, because we're all one, and to that of our cosmic consciousness, or you could say God consciousness, however that looks for you. But if we can understand any parts of just what I've tried to share but not get into the details of, I don't believe when you begin to understand that you would be afraid of death, and that you will begin to start to live your life differently in a more enlightened way of being. But it goes back to my question. So why is death often hidden from view and rarely discussed? So I think this is where I was going to share a moment ago. I think it comes down to a good question that really tries to draw out what I'm trying to communicate here. And one thing that I feel or ask is, why are children kept hidden or so-called protected from witnessing funerals? This is just a typical example. Why are children kept hidden and in the sense of being protected from witnessing funerals and I guess people's experience in that. So how many of us as parents hide or have hidden our children from attending funerals? And not just funerals, it can be in most things in life. I think there's a lot of overprotecting of children, feeling that they might not be ready for the learnings, but I personally disagree. This to me, I see as a missed opportunity for teaching moments. So we have so many opportunities as parents to teach our children that in this one example, for us to be able to normalize birth and death, I think it's such a prime opportunity that we can teach them. We teach them about birth, so why not prepare them, as I said earlier, about death? And if as children we have not been taught how to process or learn through these emotions of difficult life experiences, how does one learn resilience? Because you've got to remember, it is through challenges that we are able to learn and grow. We grow stronger from all of these experiences, and we're prepared for many of life's challenges. So the reason why I feel, that we can overprotect children is I was never that way. And I actually do remember parents would, I felt judged at times because I was so relaxed with my children to explore. And that was more their fear, thinking that their child either wasn't capable. But if we don't teach children that when you fall and break a bone from climbing a tree, if they don't get to experience that, and many experiences like that, then how do they learn to build that resilience? If we overprotect them and then they enter the world, how are they prepared for the world? Because there's going to be stuff thrown at them and they won't have the strength or the emotional intelligence to be able to deal with those situations. So often I feel we are missing these teaching opportunities, and this is one example because it highlights our fear of communicating around death. Our fears is why we hide our children from experiencing them. But we might then not experience these challenges, funerals, and death until we're adults. That might be the first time. And if you don't have the life skills to be able to move through those challenges, I actually believe it is contributing to the devastation of loss. It's one thing anyway. So I think when we are taught emotional intelligence, when we are growing up, for teaching us and teaching our children to learn the skills of managing our emotions through these experiences, so they can understand and so they can recognize their emotions plus the emotions of people around them. They're all part of the experience of their growth. But that's why we as elders are there, because we are their wisdom teachers to guide them through those experiences so that they can learn how to navigate these. And over time, they actually become quite resilient little beings. So I think, yes, we do underestimate our children's abilities to process many different circumstances of life. And it doesn't mean that any of us in those experiences won't be sad, because that's a normal part of it, right? But if we're taught when we're young and we're taught well, we have the ability to manage these and manage these tough moments and move beyond them, and we bounce back quicker. To me, that's important. But I guess we're all different, so we're each to our own in our way of teaching our children. So if we come back into the topic of why is funerals and death hidden from view, that is one example. But the other thing is, when I think if we walk on eggshells and we're silent around death and it is hidden from view, I think that's what's contributing to the fear of death. Okay, because they're smart. They know something's gone on. Just like animals know when something's about to happen. It's all energy. So they do know something's taking place, even though it might not be communicated. But they'll see it as a fear. And this fear of ours and not communicating is what becomes these programmed stories that we pass on to our children as parents and as their role models. And I think this is where we need to be responsible for how we feel so that we're not actually passing on our fears, so to speak. So you only have to look at, like ourselves as an example now. How much programming have you noticed within yourself? Have you ever noticed how you do what your parents do? Could be anything from how you butter your toast. So this is where I'm coming from. We unintentionally pass our thoughts and our beliefs on. So it's just something to be mindful of, I feel, because it's all contributing to our fears of death and why we most likely aren't talking about it. So my question to you is, so what do you think? Have today, what I've mentioned, do you feel that it could be the reason that we find death uncomfortable? I would love to hear your thoughts. So I hope that you feel comfortable to share your experiences in the comments below. I would love to open the conversation in community because that's how we learn together. Do you fear death? Was death normalized in your experience growing up in your home? All these things. What is it? Has any of what I've said made you uncomfortable? Do you have questions about anything, I guess, the life cycle? I could talk for hours on many things. But today, I hope to at least hope that you were able to get something from this shared topic on why is it that no one wants to talk about death or dying. And I hope that it is so from today you can begin to feel more comfortable to start conversations with family, friends, so you can remove any fears that you might have about dying. But I hope to encourage you to learn how to communicate with the bereaved. So overall, when it does touch your life, it will be less devastating for you and everyone involved. So thank you for listening today. I hope you found this information valuable. And if you did find it valuable, I hope that you might be willing to support this information to get further. And by doing so, it takes a like, a comment, or a share, or a subscribe for this to sort of travel out into the ethers. So I thank you. And to finish with, there's a belief I have actually. This belief is, I believe, shared wisdom is helping bringing people in community to learn together. And this is what all of this is about, bringing all of us together so we can learn together through our own discernment and what makes sense and resonates with us. Thank you for listening. Namaste, and have a great week.